And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 230, presented by Prize Picks and Game Time Tickets. My name is Conor Ryan, and as you can see, we're doing a solo pod. Approximately, let's see, 4 hours, no, 5 hours actually, after the Bruins 2023-24 season came to a crushing end at the hands of the Florida Panthers. Bruins lose game six on home ice, uh, 2-1. Goal by Gustav Forsling with a minute, 33 seconds left in regulation is the backbreaker for the Bruins. Jeremy Swayman, who has been stellar all postseason, gives up a short side rebound goal to Forsling. Not the way you want to end things, but again, we'll talk about big picture stuff and Swayman and all that stuff a little bit later on in the podcast. So, not this is not going to be harping on Swayman and that goal because the Bruins wouldn't even be in this spot, probably wouldn't be in this round without Jeremy Swayman. But it's typical hockey, right? In terms of how strong a player can be throughout a postseason. And sometimes it's the one play that gets them. That's all they're talking about after the game. And Swayman mentioned post game of how unacceptable that play was in terms of getting beat there in that situation. Again, you look at just where Swayman's been this whole year. It's just unfortunate that it ends like that for a guy who is without a doubt the Bruins' best player in this playoff run. But um, again, I think you look at this game six maybe just within the lens of um, how the Bruins played, and it kind of just encapsulates a little bit of how the series has gone, right? In that at the end of the day, the best team won. Like you look at the Bruins and the way they started. Um, Great start to the game in terms of, had a 4-0 edge in shots on goal against Sergei Bobrovsky, had a few really dominant shifts from their bottom six, drew a penalty, couldn't convert. And I think when you look at, the Bruins and their struggles, we can say that the Florida Panthers are the better team, right? In terms of probably their overall depth, especially up front. Um, have a really active D core that can do a lot of damage. The Bruins weren't burned maybe as much as they were last year by guys like Brennan Montour or even like up front like Kachuk didn't have a takeover series perhaps like we saw last year or we saw throughout the postseason last year for him and what he can do in a series. But you just look at guys like Anton Lundell, who had a lot of really strong games for the Florida Panthers. You got Forsling, who's maybe the most underrated defenseman, I think, in the NHL, a great player there. Um, and then you even look at just the Bruins and their own opportunities. Like the Bruins were right in this game, but had a couple of grade A chances against Sergei Bobrovsky, couldn't beat him. And again, I think you give credit to Bobrovsky as the series went on. What we all talked about, whether it's the podcast with myself and Evan, or the podcast with Ty, or any of the multiple ones, we always talked about, like especially leading into this series and as it went on, it's like Bobrovsky, not that great. You look at his save percentage, look at some of the goals he let up early on in the series. You're like, just get pucks on net against this guy. You're gonna win games. And full credit to him. I mean, he's an established goalie with a couple of Vezinas, so this isn't anything new for him. But he really stepped up, I think, and made some critical saves for the Panthers in multiple games. There has been 2 or 3 games now where the Bruins have had either multiple grade A looks, breakaways, where the Bruins had opportunities to either build a lead, claw out of a deficit, all those things, weren't able to get it done. I think you look at just the Bruins and where they ended, um, this series, especially in terms of special teams. Bruins PK was really, really strong, I think, in this series. But again, Bruins go 0 for 2. 0 for 2 on the power play again tonight. Only had one power play goal the entire series. This is a group that, yes, we look at the way the Bruins are built in terms of the amount of, I don't want to call them bargain bin signings, the rookies, the kind of cast offs that compile a lot of this roster. But the top power play unit still has a lot of impactful players, with David Pastrnak and McAvoy and Brad Marchand getting back into the lineup. Um, it should be able to do some damage. Is it the same group we saw from years past when it's Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak and Torrey Krug? No, I think we all expect that. But you look at the weapons the Bruins do have out there, you shouldn't be finishing a 6-game playoff series with one power play goal, especially when the margins were so tight in some of these games. Like even look at like Game 4, people look at the Sam Bennett power play goal as the big takeaway from that game. But Bruins had multiple chances to put that game away. You look at Game 2, the Bruins let or Game 3 rather, where the Bruins let one of those leads slip away from them. The similar situation, right? And even like Game 2, the Bruins come up short there. There's multiple times in this series, and as much as some of them, these final results have been lopsided, where the Bruins have had chances to either put Florida away or build their lead and get themselves some breathing room. And that just hasn't been the case. And I think it comes down to special teams and just finishing ability on this Bruins team. I think you look at just what did this team in. Wasn't the goaltending. We all know that. And we all know the Bruins, what Jeremy Swayman did in that first round series against Toronto, what he did in this Florida series. This series maybe isn't even back in Boston for a Game 6 if he doesn't stop Reinhart on that chance with 9 seconds left in Game 5. No issue there. Bruins probably need to add a little bit more heft, I would probably say, to their D-core, which seems to be a prerequisite for any team that goes far in the playoffs. Again, I still think you've got pieces there that work. We'll talk a little bit about Lowry and his impact, and I think he had a breakthrough playoff for the Bruins. But I think if you look at the biggest change for the Bruins, that has to be up front. Whether it's addressing the need for a top 6 center down the middle, or just having more scoring punch. Because again, like you look at the Bruins and in this series, again, we know how the Bruins approach things offensively. They've strayed from the Bruce Cassidy school of get every puck on net from every possible angle. They're more of a quality over quantity team in terms of their offensive approach. And you look at what they did in this series, right? So Bruins get outscored 11-10 at 5-on-5 play by the Panthers. But the Bruins had a pretty convincing edge in terms of high danger scoring chances. It was 60-41 in favor of the Bruins in terms of generating grade A looks, whether that's, breakaways, shots from the slot, like Brazeau had one that, is exactly the type of shot you want to be taking in that spot. Rebounds, deflections, tips, bringing the puck to the net front. All the kind of things that even if you're not ending a game with 35 shots on goal, if you're generating those chances, it's going to help you out in terms of being able to beat a goalie. And again, the Bruins stuck with that system. I think you saw like Game 5 was a great example of, ramping up your shot volume a little bit. The Bruins didn't end the game with 15 shots on goal in that Game 5, right? They were able to, get more shots in on Bobrovsky, but at the same time generate quality looks at the same and over that same stretch. I think he was, I think you look at the Bruins and what they did in that Game 5. I think they had a 12-3 edge in high danger scoring chances, even with that higher shot volume. Again, if your D-core is firing pucks and have shooting lanes up at the blue line and leading to tips and rebounds, or you're doing an indirect pass down to the net front or behind the net, as you saw with like McAvoy to DeBrusk to Gigi on that opening goal in Game 5, that's a recipe for success if you're generating those grade A chances. But I think you look at the Bruins and what they're missing, whether it's, pushing a guy like Charlie Coyle, who, didn't make much of an impact offensively, or Pavel Zacha, who, again, had that goal, great breakaway finish in Game 6, but one playoff goal in 24 playoff games, or 25 rather, career playoff games. It's not going to cut it. You need just more from that spot. But beyond those two guys, I just look at like this team. It just feels like they were missing another, 25, 30 goal scorer. I think like DeBrusk had a really, really strong playoff for this team, and remains to be seen if he's back. But like you almost need another player of that caliber sprinkled in somewhere in the, the top 9, ideally the top 6, and this is just spitballing and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but you look at guys like, I don't know, Bertuzzi, or you're looking at like even like veteran guys who there's a lot of guys in this free agency class, and you got like the Reinhardts and the Gensels, which I don't think the Bruins are going to be in the market for these guys who are going to be making $9-10 million a year. But there's a lot of these players in that range of like 29 to 33, maybe willing to sign a shorter term deal, to join a team that should be in the mix. So like the Tyler Toffoli's, those kinds of players. There's quite a few of them out there. And you look at this team and their knack for generating high danger chances. How much more will it help you out if you have a guy that has a 25, 30 goal scoring season on their resume, multiple ones? If you look at a guy like Toffoli or Teravainen or some of these other players that could add a little bit of a scoring punch on the wing this upcoming season. So I think that's something that looms large for the Bruins. It's they were in quite a few of these games. They pushed a very, very good Panthers team that I don't think has even reached kind of their ceiling or their potential in terms of just how dangerous they can be when they're firing on all cylinders. But at the end of the day, I think the better team won in this series. And the Bruins were right in it, but you got to convert on your chances. You've had great goaltending. You had stretches where you're able to break the puck out and not create so many self-inflicted miscues. But whether it's not capitalizing on special teams, making things harder for yourself in terms of penalties, another too many men penalty here in Game 6, or just the fact that this team just doesn't have enough guys that have that finishing ability. I think that loomed large in this series, and the reason why you have the Bruins heading home or packing their bags in a couple of days over Warrior Ice Arena. So we'll dissect a little bit more of this game and this season and what's ahead in a couple minutes. But let's take a quick break, hear from our good friends over at Prize Picks. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a whole new level during basketball and hockey's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks has something for every sports fan, from basketball and hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in place even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, Prize Picks will have your back and not count that as a loss. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and a huge selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And with the Celtics season in full swing, there's plenty of opportunities to participate in Prize Picks. This week on Prize Picks, I'm selecting Jason Tatum for more than 30 points, Kristaps Porzingis for more than 2 blocks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And now, let's get back to the show. Once again, shout out to our good friends and sponsors over at Prize Picks. So we already gave kind of a quick recap of Game 6, and we'll elaborate more on this series as a whole once we get the full crew back. Again, I'm recording this right now. It is 1:40. It's not too bad, but recording a solo podcast tonight. We'll dive into this a little bit more once you get the whole crew later on this upcoming week. But I think, pivoting a little bit here beyond looking at Game 6, it's worth maybe taking a lens and seeing how we assess this overall season as a whole. And again, like, I understand, I think at the end of any season, there's the doom and gloom, or there's the sour sentiment in terms of, this series could have been different if such and such happened. If the Bruins, buried a few of these chances, if they converted on the power play a little bit more, if the whole Sam Bennett thing, if they didn't take out Marchand, if he didn't play in Game 4, doesn't score the power play goal. Like, you can go down the list in terms of the what ifs for any series when you're the team that's that comes up short in any of those situations. But I think just overall looking at the season, if I'm a Bruins fan, I'm feeling pretty good about the way this season went in terms of, one, just the limitations you had going into the year, the expectations that I think were probably pretty low, which was to be expected, right? When you lose guys like Bergeron and Krejci and Bertuzzi, Hall, so many players that, were such a key piece of the Bruins last season on that record-setting run they had. It's only natural to expect the worst when you've got, almost $5 million of bonus overages. You've got barely any money to retain players. You have to kind of go to the bargain bin to just fill out your roster, let alone, be able to, pry out top targets in free agency or trades or anything like that. So I think you look at where the Bruins were at the start of this year. I think you view it as a positive in terms of this was always, I think, going to be a bridge year. It's all about what you make of it, right? Like for some teams, regardless of the sport, a bridge year is 500 treading water. Maybe you sneak, if you're an NHL team, you sneak in as a wild card team and get, you know, a gentleman's sweep in 5 games or something like that. That's usually what a bridge year is. If you're the Bruins and you had these kind of low expectations and you come out of it, not only playing into the second round, playing a very good Panthers team, showing some resolve in terms of, jumping out to that convincing win in game one, but this team easily could have rolled over, going back down to Florida for game five, made a game out of it, made a series out of it, inspired, I think, belief that maybe this team could maybe flip the script from last year. I think that gives full credit to the guys that, they have on this team, but beyond that, and the exceeding expectations, I think it's looking beyond that, right? In terms of where this team is moving forward. And if you look at this season, if you told me, if you're going into the 2023-24 season and let's say late July after the free agency ends and all that stuff, and I told you the Bruins are going to play into the second round, they were going to beat the Maple Leafs in an instant classic game 7, and moving forward that one, Jeremy Swayman is that guy, is your number one franchise goalie, a guy that can carry you through multiple rounds, especially once you add more to your team. And you also know that you've got young talent, that it's not an aberration. It's not, how many times have we ended a year where it's like, well, next year we'll see what Fabian Lysell could do. He could be 20 goals. We've mentioned that time and time again every offseason, right? Where Evan and I look ahead to guys that maybe played 5 games up to the NHL level or maybe had a good year in Providence, and we're like, these guys need to take a step forward, and maybe a guy like Merkulov is that player this upcoming season. But the Bruins have tangible young talent on their team right now who've showcased their talents and have taken steps forward and have thrived in these roles, that now going to next year, it's not like it's what if these guys, make it to the NHL and thrive. They've already done it. They already showed it during this, whether it's the regular season or the playoff run. Like if you're the Bruins and you already have a pretty good foundation in place, you got a number one goalie that is due for a nice pay raise that will be fully deserved in a couple of months. But you look at like Mason Lohrei, who was always a promising prospect, but took a huge step forward in dev camp, or rather during training camp, and asserted himself and made a significant push there. And then from where he was in early October, November, when he first started playing, NHL reps, to where he ended this year, night and day in terms of a guy that went from a very intriguing, promising prospect to a guy that looks like a legitimate top 4 weapon at the NHL next year and moving forward. You look at guys like, even like Johnny Beecher or Justin Brazeau, who go through the ups and downs, but next year could be, bottom 6 fixtures that are able to build off of this year. And then even Matthew Poitras, right, who exceeded all expectations, made the NHL roster out of camp, had a really, really strong start there, hits a lull, ends the year with shoulder surgery, but look at, what promise he showed last year. And now he's, still 20 years old going into next season, has, that experience at the NHL level already under his belt, knows about the physicality, the schedule, the grind, what he needs to do to get better. You add that guy into the mix already, like you're in a pretty good spot. And that's beyond the fact that you've got, over 22 million in cap space right now. So I think you view this year as a success in terms of where this team was at the start of the fall and where they ended it now in the middle of May. I think you have to be happy with where this team was. It's frustrating. Like again, you could make the case that the Bruins should have gone even further. They pushed Florida, and it always sucks to lose. We all know that. It always sucks to see a season end when your team isn't the one holding on to the cup and lifting it. But I just think you look at where this team was just a few months ago, and again, it all comes down to how I pitch it, right? Like if I pitched to you a few months ago, this team would be, playing into late May, and they've got all these guys that have taken huge steps forward with a bunch of cap space on the horizon. I think you'd take that. So we'll wrap this one up by looking a little bit more at the future. But before we do that, let's take a quick break, hear from our friends over at Game Time Tickets.
Quick break to tell you about my good friends over at Game Time. I am very excited about the NBA playoffs, and what's awesome is here in Boston, TD Garden is the best atmosphere for a playoff game. Thankfully, we have Game Time, which is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Maybe it's the NBA playoffs or it's the NHL playoffs. The same is true with the Bruins. TD Garden gets so fun during this time of year, and you want to be there. The Bruins and Celtics are in pursuit of championships, and as the rounds go on, the crowd gets better and better. Nothing beats it. And with Game Time, there's last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. There's flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And there are zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Again, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets and head over to Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code, again, CLNS. I can't be more clear about that. Use code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Now, back to the show.
Once again, shout out to Game Time Tickets. So yeah, looking ahead, which again, we are going to talk about this ad nauseum, whether it's myself, Evan, Ty. There's going to be plenty of time now on the horizon to look at how this team can improve. And again, you look at the fact you already have a lot of, key guys already signed long-term. Swayman's going to be due for a sizable new contract, which will be deserved, but that's kind of your other major point of business, right? You have to figure out what to do with Jake DeBrusk. And I think for me, it all comes down to what the dollars and cents are. I think he's still a very, very good player that can help your team. He's good defensively. Had an up and down regular season, even though he admitted in his post-game scrum with the media that he actually had a broken hand that he suffered right before the bye week, I believe. So was fighting that for most of the regular season, healed right before the playoffs, and he takes off and has a really, really strong playoff run for the Bruins. So I really like DeBrusk and what he brings, especially if you're able to add another impact wing into the mix as well. It just comes down to what the dollars and cents are. Like if we're talking 5.25, I'd be there for it. If we're talking about 6 or anything above, then it gets dicey, right? Because you still have to look at like how are you improving down the middle, how are you, adding more scoring depth throughout the roster. So that's the other major point of business. But other than that, the Bruins go into this offseason with, key guys already signed long term, a lot of young, rookies and first, second year players on very cheap deals right now who should make major contributions, whether that's Lorai, whether that's, Patra, who will be healthy this upcoming year. Should be cleared for training camp. Even like Beecher, Brazeau, guys that you can, if they're healthy, you can reasonably expect are going to be right in the mix and can take steady minutes and what their respective roles are. So the Bruins are already in a pretty good spot when you look at just how much of their roster is already accounted for, and add in the fact they've got right now over 22 million in cap space. And again, that can change and all of a sudden be 27 million if you're able to move Lena Solmark. And that, again, seems like the first order of business. Again, I think this the goalie rotation era is probably coming to an end in terms of you saw what Swayman did, his ascension as the Bruins' number one goaltender, and what he provided and what lift he gave. And kind of, I think, validates that, as intriguing as the goalie rotation is, if you have one goalie that's locked in and can provide that extra lift and you can be your go-to guy, you got to roll with the hot goaltender. So it does seem like Allmark's time in Boston is probably numbered. So it depends on what you're going to get for him, right? Like you have to, again, contend with his trade options and his trade protections that he has on his contract, and what the return actually is. But if you're the Bruins, all of a sudden you could free up a lot of cap space and maybe get either a player, a draft pick, something else that can further help your team while also subtracting from an area of strength on your roster. So we'll dive more into possible targets for the Bruins. We're going to hear a lot of, I'm sure, Elias Lindholm rumors. You've got, talent on the wings like Toffoli or, Teravainen, even Steven Stamkos. We'll see if he goes back to Tampa or what, but that's the kind of veteran guy that if you want to sign to a short-term deal, I think could be a really impactful player. Kind of reminds me of like when Dallas signed Joe Pavelski a few years ago, and he's been money for them. Stamkos is a guy, a veteran leader, a captain of a very successful franchise that I think a lot of teams would covet if he does hit the free agent market. So no shortage of options for the Bruins. And it's not even counting like possible hockey trades, right? Like maybe the Bruins look at Sunderman or players like that who aren't, free agents, like beyond Elias Lindholm, whose, production has dropped a little bit, even though he's had a bit of a stronger playoff run for Vancouver. Is he a guy you want to be giving $8.5 million a year towards? Maybe not. So maybe they look at, trades as a way to do that as well. So we will all dive more into that moving forward. But I think the base, the main takeaway, I think, beyond the obvious frustrations and, sadness that the season is over, I think if you're the Bruins and if you're a Bruins fan, especially, I think you should view this year as a success. And I think there's a lot to be excited about moving forward. You look at last year, not a lot to be happy about when you look at the implications of the record-setting season, Bergeron and Krejci in their futures, and that kind of hanging over this team. Even the year before that, when they lose to Carolina, same thing. Like Bergeron, obviously Krejci wasn't there, but Bergeron in his window, whether that's shut. Look at this team now. And yes, it's unfortunate they lose in the second round, but you're now running it back with guys like, an established core already in place, a lot of impact talent that you should be able to build around, a number one goalie, young players who proved their value and should continue to improve next year, and, potentially 25, 26, 27 million to spend on an already pretty solid foundation. So it's going to be a huge offseason for Don Sweeney and the Bruins to aggressively retool to a team that already has a lot of key pieces in place. So it's an exciting time of year, right? Like, as frustrating as it is to have this year end, it's not like 2023 or 2022 where it's like, all right, this might be the window. What's next? It's like, yeah, what is next? How can they kind of build and improve this team? Because they have a window and cap space to make those things happen. So it should be a really, really fascinating offseason. So we'll have you covered every step of the way there. But as we put an end to the 2023-24 Bruins Centennial season, want to give a shout out to all you guys for listening all season long, whether it's Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat, all of our stuff. We love talking about hockey. We love interacting with you guys, the fans, about this team that you guys feel so passionate about. And we love the opportunity to do this every single day, whether it's covering the game, talking hockey on podcasts, taking to social media, all those things. So again, it's an opportunity that I don't take for granted. I know Evan and Ty and everyone else who works and covers the Bruins and gets to interact with these fans, they don't take it for granted either in terms of the opportunity we have. So a sincere thank you to everyone who listened, read my stuff, followed me on Twitter, retweeted something, any of those things. It goes a long way, and it puts things in perspective of how fortunate we are to be in this spot and cover this team, and for you guys to root for this team and just enjoy hockey as we all love so very much. So want to thank you guys all so much for listening. This is episode 230 of Poke the Bear. We'll have plenty more in the weeks and months ahead as we go into the off season. You fans have a great rest of your week.